All right. So, yeah, Eddie, you're free to unmute if you'd like, but we're going to start the recording now. So, hello, everyone. Thank you for coming to the February edition of FMPUG, and we are going to talk some PHP. We've already discussed this a little bit before using the FileMaker API for PHP, but it was kind of like a 10,000 foot view. It was very brief, not a whole lot of code shown, and didn't help me a lot when I was starting out trying to figure out how to do this stuff with PHP. So I'm going to start off with an icebreaker. What do computers and air conditioners have in common? They both become useless when you open Windows. But I'm just kidding. All the Windows fans out there, don't hate me, which is probably just Chris right now. So here is the resource that FileMaker gives you for the custom web publishing guide. I really like it. It has a lot going on in there, but it's really helpful at getting you started with the PHP API. Shows you some common commands that you're going to want to do, how to do finds, make a portal, get related records, and things like that. But it doesn't show you what to do in PHP to actually manipulate the data that you get back from the API. So that's what I'm going to show you is what's the rest of that. I'll show you what I'm talking about as far as what the guide gives. So we're going to pull that up, and it's probably going to take its sweet time here. All right. Let's try this one more time. Okay, so here is the FileMaker Server 13 web publishing guide. Now, we are not on FileMaker Server 14 here at Extend Tech, so I got to use the older version, but it's about the same. So here we go. Now we're all loaded up here. I'm not sure why that took so long. Let's go down to page somewhere around here they start talking about portals. All right. So here's how you get a portal. So first you have the current record object, which it shows you how to do above. Then within that, you can use the getRelatedSet function and put here the name of your portal. That has to be on your layout, or else that won't work. And this is how you fetch related records, and they get returned as a related records array. But that's already very hard and very vague. But knowing this, you can get an array of related records. But now what do? You've more or less created a portal for a specific record, but you don't have any visual for that. And I was so unclear on how to get from this array to something that looks like a portal, and there's just no help here. You could give you commands for create a record, how to delete a record in a portal, but not for how to display the contents of what you just got. So before we get to going too far deep in here, keep in mind the site's a work in progress. I'm still an amateur PHP developer, so I'm sure there are probably some better ways to do this stuff. My code I made extremely verbose with lots of spacing, so it'd be easy to read. And I like it that way. And this is my first real PHP project. ExtendStack uses an internal FileMaker solution named Abe. We track our company's contacts, activities, objectives, hours, and much more stuff than that. The goal was to create an interface for our employees to enter hours on their phones. All right, so it started out very simple, just kind of an hours tracker, right? So here's what it looks like, right? So this is the landing screen, basic login screen here. So I first started by getting the CSS right and recreating the Meadow theme that we use in Abe. And for a reminder, I'll show you what that looks like. So this is Abe, and this is the Meadow theme. You can see it's got this this lime green border and kind of tan background, light green and dark green everywhere. So once I got the CSS file working, it made everything I was doing look familiar going forward. So I knew when I was doing something that looked like what we already had in Abe. And there are a lot of parallels between layout objects in FileMaker and objects in HTML. the custom web publishing guide doesn't really help you at all here. Sometimes the parallels are pretty obvious, but sometimes HTML uses a completely different name for the same thing. So here's some of the parallels. So these are FileMaker objects and HTML objects. The layout background, FileMaker, the most equal object I can find in HTML is the body. Am I? All right, I've been informed that I am breaking up. So it's better than being broken up with, I guess. But so, and then here we have, you know, in FileMaker you've got the header, right? So I'll go into layout mode and show this part. So luckily in HTML there's something that's named just the same. You can format a header in HTML as well. Buttons still called buttons. Fields become inputs. A multi-line field becomes text area. Pop-up menu becomes a select. Labels are still called labels, and timestamps are called date time. So a lot very similar, but a little bit different, just enough to throw you off. So let's start off with our login screen.
Yeah, we're still getting pretty choppy. He says the video looks great. But...
Okay. I'm not sure what control over that I have. I don't really have like a microphone sensitivity.
You want to try calling in on the phone like that?
Not sure. Well, I don't really have this problem every other day, do I?
No, but you're on my network, my bandwidth. Yeah, I was gonna say it's maybe we up with a million things. Maybe you and I can huddle around my computer without shutting that down just to see.
All right, I'll try a phone call here. Let's see if I can call in and get some better quality. So I'm gonna go dark. All right, I should be back. So now I'm gonna try. I wish I could. To be honest, no, I don't know. No, not on my phone. Oh, don't worry about it. Okay, so I don't know what to do here. Still having audio technical difficulties. What is the microphone on this? Oh boy. All right, how about now? Can anybody hear me? Hello, hello.
Very good.
All right, thank you so much. Oh, okay. All right, so back to where we were. Yeah, I think he just said we're good.
I missed that.
No, I mean he unmuted for a second and said it.
Oh.
Okay, so coming back here. So yeah, I tried to make a basic login screen that looked like the Meadow theme. So in order to recreate the pill-shaped background of the Meadow theme, we started off with a div tag, which starts for division. This is a generic area that can contain other objects, not unlike a tab panel. The div has a CSS class of body to mimic the body part in FileMaker. And within our div, we're going to want a form. This tells the HTML engine that within the form, there will be data entered by the user that will need to be submitted. The form action explains what to do next, run login.php. We're going to pass the values in our inputs to login.php using the post method. This will pass variables that can be accessed using $post variable name. So let's take a look at our example file here. So this is my basic login screen. So this pretty much just tells the PHP engine what's coming. So the document type is HTML, language is English. Here's our character set. That's pretty
all pretty basic HTML stuff there. This is an important line that tells you make the viewing size of the screen, which they call the viewport in HTML, whatever the device width is. All right, and don't zoom in is basically what this initial scale part is saying. So that's very important these days for iPhones and things like that. Here's the title of my site. I'm including my CSS here. And then we get down to what will look more like my layout in FileMaker. So I start my body, and then I start my header, and I say this is my Abe login screen. That's what this part is here. And we'll skip the PHP part for right now. Then we'll get down here to where I have a div where the class is body. So that's supposed to mimic this part, all right, of the layout, the tan part. So I had to do a little bit, add another body part to my HTML layout because of how the Meadow theme looks. Then my form method is post, action is login on PHP. Here's my labels, and here's my inputs, which is the same thing as a field in FileMaker. You can use a placeholder here as well. So I made my placeholder text look just like it does in our layout or in our theme, and that looks good. And here I have an input with a type of password that will basically mask what you're typing, which is a very nice feature. And then I have my input type of submit, which is actually a button and not an input at all. It doesn't look like that. So that's what this login button is. All right, so we're going to log in, be brought to our main menu. So our form is taking us to login.php, which behaves like an on-first window open script. The first thing I do here is create a new FileMaker object. I must pass the posted username and password variables. This creates a connection to FileMaker that we will use throughout our website. I'm going to access this object on every other page using session start and my $session FileMaker variable. A session variable is similar to a global variable, except that the session must be started on every page that requires a session variable. Once we've created our connection, we test to see if it was successful. Here we have to trap for our first error. So let's take a look at login.php here. So this is what runs when I click the submit button on my form. So I, of course, have to require the FileMaker API. I require an external functions PHP file, which we'll get to later. Then I start my session, and I make a new session variable that I'm going to call FileMaker. And that's going to be a new FileMaker object where the file name is Abe, the server is localhost, and I'm going to use my posted variables for username and password to authenticate. Then I'm going to try and list the layouts just to get some kind of result to see, did I authenticate correctly, or have I not even gotten that far? So I would get an error if I tried to do anything in FileMaker and I didn't authenticate. So if I got an error, then we're going to shoot us right back to the login screen, and it's going to display the result of the error. So if we go back to the login screen, you can see that's that part we just skipped a second ago, where I say under the login title, I say if there was an error, then display it as like a subheader. So if I log out, I put in the wrong password and I log in, it's going to give me back the error that FileMaker gave me, right? So invalid username or password. Okay? So otherwise, if we did authenticate, then we're going to go to our user account screen. We're going to find, using the posted username again, and we're going to execute that find. We should only find one W. Jackson in our database, right? We don't want multiple user accounts for the same person. So I'm just going to use get first record. Then I'm going to set another $session variable here. And this is just for our internal use. We use a very particular kind of primary key to distinguish who is an objective or a task assigned to me, Chris, Jason, etc. So rather than using our names, we use an assignee key. And then we move on to the main menu screen, which you guys just saw. So once we've authenticated, we're brought to the main menu. Here we have our first need for buttons. We need to be able to navigate around the site and to log out when we're done. Buttons are going to execute JavaScript commands when clicked. And this was a very big problem for me, as the FileMaker API only works in PHP. So this incompatibility stopped me cold in my tracks until I found a way around it. The logout button inspired me to turn commonly used PHP actions into functions and store them in a separate PHP file. So let's look at my main menu here. So now in my header, I've got the name of the screen that we're on, and then I've got a function for logout button which is actually in my functions.php file. So going and taking a look at that, here's my logout button. So it basically just echoes out a bit of HTML that states this is a header button, so it's going to look kind of like this, be easily tappable with your finger, you know, but not like the whole width of the screen. And on click, it's going to run this bit of JavaScript. So it's going to go back to the index.php at the beginning of our site, and it's going to set the variable logout to true, and the button is going to say logout, right? So I made this a function because my logout button is going to be all over the site, and I don't want to have to change, you know, things I've changed. I don't want to have to make changes to the logout button on every screen that it exists on. I want to just change it in my functions.php file and have those changes propagate out. So, and if we look at the index.php file, up at the very top, what I skipped before, if a logout variable is set, then we're going to start the session, and we're going to make this the FileMaker object null. So that way, if they log in and they do some stuff and then they log out, if they go back a screen, if I didn't do this, then they could still see the data that they were manipulating. But if they try and go back once I've made the FileMaker object null, it can't access FileMaker anymore because I've cleared it out. So just a little security measure. And also, there's a couple more buttons down here, but these are more simple examples of the same thing. This is a main menu button, so it spans the whole width of the screen here. And on click, we're going to go to the document location of hourslist.php. So I'm going to click on hours, and it's going to talk to the FileMaker database and get me a list of my hours. So the first thing we have to do to create our list of hours is a find. We must start another PHP session and authenticate with FileMaker. Then we use the new find command, add find criterion, execute, and get records to end up with an array of records that we can manipulate. By default, I'm showing hours for the logged in user since last Monday. So let's take a look at the hours list. So this is my first list layout. So I'm going to open my body, require the FileMaker API, get my functions that I use, start a session, and here I'm going to declare my layout name just because my layout name could be referenced many times in this PHP script. So I just want to set the variable right at the top that tells me what the layout name is. So if I need to change it, I don't have to change it a bunch of places. So we're going to skip this part down here. We'll get back to that. Now down here at the else is what we'll do if we're not passing any parameters. So we're going to make a new find command on our hours layout. And we're going to add some criteria for hours that are assigned to me, right? Remember, this is the session variable we set on clocking in. And here we're going to do our first find on a date, which is a little bit tricky. So we'll start here. So we're using the ... operator in FileMaker, which is obviously very useful for date ranges, and hopefully we're already familiar with that. But down here, this is a PHP function date that will format a date. So I'm formatting, because I'm not passing a date to this, I'm just saying format it as 2-digit month / 2-digit day / 4-digit year. And I'm not passing a date to it, it's just formatting the current date that way. But how do I get last Monday's date? That's a little trickier. So I'm using the same format, but this time I'm passing a date into the date function. So I'm going to say, get me string to time, and get me last Monday based on the current time. So once again, if I don't pass anything to the time function, it's just going to return the current time, and then it's saying, get me last Monday respective to the current time. So that's how I get a find that goes from last Monday ... to today. Then I execute that, and if I had errors, then I'm going to reload this page and show the error. Otherwise, I'm going to use get records to end up with, once again, an array of records. So now we use our array of records to loop through each record and show each record's data. For this, we'll need a combination of the table, t-head or table header, th or table header label, t-body or table body, tr or table row, and td or table data tags. We begin with a table tag so that HTML can give our list some structure. The column labels are going to be in the t-head in the first tr or table row, where each column label will be in its own th. The column data will be in the t-body, where each record will be in its own tr, and each field within each record will be in its own td. Each tr in the t-body, when clicked, will pass the record's ID to the next screen, the form layout. So I know that's a mouthful, but it's a lot easier when you see it on screen here. So here's my body of my layout again, and I have a table where I'm going to format it like our list layout is. So that's what the CSS class is about. And I open the table header, and I open the first row, which is just the label row here, right? And here's my label for the record number, project, clock in, clock out, and is it billable or not. And then the table body is where we're going to print out our record data. So I'm going to start a counter, and for each of my hours records, I'm going to increment the counter, so I'm on record 1, and I'm going to fetch the primary key of the record, put it in a variable, and say if you click this table row, then you're going to go to the document at the location hours details.php, and we're going to pass the hours ID here, and using the primary key of the record. Okay, so that's how I do the more or less drill down sort of thing. Then I print out the record number, and I continue to print out all the inputs that I need. So the project that the hours record is associated with, and then we'll get into times and checkboxes, which are a little tricky. So in our list, we need to show the clock in and clock out timestamps. I want these formatted as month, day, year, 12-hour clock, AM, PM. However, if I tell PHP to format the date time that way, it treats blanks strangely. A blank date becomes the current date, and a blank time becomes 12 p.m. I'm using a PHP function to handle these inaccuracies. So here I have my PHP datetime format, right? So I have an input name of clock in, the type is datetime, and it's disabled so that the user can't click on it and get it to do anything. He can't like modify date or something. So I'm going to pass the timestamp from FileMaker, the date and the time into my PHP function, and then we'll go take a look at what that's doing. So here I take the timestamp that was given to me from FileMaker, and I turn it into a date time in PHP. And then I say if there's a date that was passed and a time that was passed, and they're not empty, then I'm going to format it as 2-digit month, 2-digit day, 2-digit year, the way that I described in the slide. But if only the date is not empty and the time is empty, then we're going to format it just show me the date. Otherwise, the date time is null. And if I didn't do this, then I'd end up with 12 p.m. and the defaults that I was talking about. So also in our list, we have a billable checkbox. Inputs have a checkbox type that will make them look similar to the FileMaker checkbox. If the hours record is billable, we need to include the special keyword checked when defining the HTML input. So here is my billable checkbox. Here's the type that I was talking about. And if the hours record is actually billable, then we need to include the special keyword checked and the declaration of our input. And then I continue on to make sure it's disabled. And that's going to look like this. So it's disabled, so I can't click on it and interact with it. And if the record is actually available, then the record is checked. So on the hours form, we're going to begin by fetching the ID of the hours record that was passed from the list to find the record we want to edit. So to create a form layout that looks like what we have on FileMaker, we'll need a div that looks like a tab panel, a form within that, and then our many inputs. So here's my first form layout, more or less. So I'm going to start the same way I started my my list. I'm going to require FileMaker as my functions, start a session, declare the layout name, and then I'm going to get the hours layout and store it in an object so that we can access it. And if I didn't pass any variables, which we'll skip this part, then I'm going to find for the hours record ID that was passed, finding the primary key for that, and then we're going to get that record and land on it. And here I store the primary key for later use again. So we're going to need to translate our pop-up menus used on this layout into selects in HTML. We're going to use for each loops to build our value lists. We experience our first dates here as well. FileMaker stores dates in a way that won't display in an HTML date input, so I'm using a function to convert the date. Also, we run into our first text area in this file, thankfully, these are very simple to implement. So here, let's go down to, let's say, the categories, right? So I have my label for categories, and this is going to be a pop-up, right? So let me drill down on my my hours record here. And here's what my category looks like. It's a pop-up menu or a select in HTML. So I do a find on my categories layout for all active categories. I execute it. I get the records back as an array here. And I say for each category record, if the primary key of the category is equal to the foreign key of the hours record, so the category in the hours record is this category record that we're printing out, then mark that as it's an option in the select, right? So each one of these are called options in HTML. And mark it as selected. So this is kind of like our checkboxes where we have to have that special keyword so that this record will be the one that's checked by default, administration here. So if the primary key matches the foreign key, then mark it as selected and tell us we got a category selected. Otherwise, just print out the option and don't mark it selected. And if no category got selected, then we're going to want to print out pretty much a placeholder here, which is like an invisible option that just shows the word category that can't actually be selected by the user or anything. Because otherwise, it would just default to the last option that got printed out by PHP, and that's not very helpful. And coming down here a little bit, we get to dates. So here's my clock in date here. So here we're going to use my PHP date format function, and we're going to pass in the FileMaker date. And that's a little bit simpler, but it's very similar to date time format. We're going to say if the date's not empty, then format it 4-digit year, dash 2-digit month, dash 2-digit day. Otherwise, mark the date as null, because otherwise, once again, it will default my date to something silly like 1970 or something like that, very old date. And I have to do it in 4-digit year, 2-digit month, 2-digit day, or else Chrome just doesn't display this, and it looks like there's no date in the field. So I had a lot of trouble with that one, so I used a function to keep my dates in check. And then down here, I have my notes, which are in a text area, and that's what this looks like. So you can kind of expand it to be as big as you want. So anytime you have multi-line text, you're going to want to use a text area. So now we're ready to tuck all of our data away in FileMaker. We begin by starting another session, authenticating with FileMaker. We use getRecordById and the record ID passed from the form to isolate the record we want to make changes to. Then we're going to use setField and the $post variables passed from the form to change values in each field in the record. When setting a Boolean field, we'll need to check if the associated variable is set and conditionally set the field to 1 or 0. Lastly, we use commit to finish our changes to the record. As usual, there is error trapping involved here. So let's take a look at what it looks like to submit this form, right? So when we click the submit button, we're going to run this. I'm going to get FileMaker, get my function, start my session, and then I'm going to use getRecordById and get the record ID that was passed to retrieve the hours record we want to edit in FileMaker. And then I use a function here just to help you with printing out the results of these. You know, what field am I setting to what value? And so my FileMaker setField function looks like this. So you pass in the record and the field and the data you want to set. In the record, you set the field with this name to this data. And then I just echo out some information about what just happened. What's the name of the field? Give me a new line. What was the data that was entered? And give me 2 new lines. So that way, if something breaks, I can tell, well, what field was what's set to what data, and what was the user trying to enter, and things like that. So in my hours record, I'm going to set my assignee key to what we selected in the assignee select here. And the same thing for the project, the client, the category, all the way down. Boolean field is a little bit different. So let's take a look at FileMaker set Boolean field here. We're going to say, instead of just setting the Boolean field to the data that was passed, we have to check if the data was set. So if the data passed is set, then we set the Boolean field to 1, otherwise 0, because the data that gets passed, I'm actually not sure what it is. I can't get a 1 or a 0 or true or false or anything out of that. And FileMaker doesn't seem to recognize it. So I'm using isSet here to see did they actually check the box or not. And then down here, we say commit the hours record. And if there was an error, then we're going to show the error, and we're going to stop right here. We're going to use the exit command to just kill my PHP script where it is and let me sort through all the results I've been printing out up here. And if everything was successful, then we go back to their hours details layout with the same hours ID that was passed. So it kind of just looks like a quick refresh. So I'm not going to change anything here, but I'm going to hit the submit button. And it's going to go through all that, and it's going to just pretty much refresh the page. You know, it doesn't take too long. So now let's talk about value lists. So we've gone through how to build a select and create our own value list of sorts. So now let's see how to use a value list stored in FileMaker. We're going to travel to a contacts form, for example. Here we have a select for the language of the person or company. We'll call get value list to fields to get the country language value list. For this to work, the value list has to be used on one of the fields on the reference FileMaker layout. The value list will be returned as an array, so we must use a for each loop to manipulate each value in the value list. You may be using 1 or 2 fields in your value list, and that's okay because both are going to be included within every element in the array. So let's jump over to contacts, and let me find my language example here. All right, there you are. Okay, so here's my my language label. Here's the selector pop-up menu, and in here I'm going to use my function for build value list one field. I'm going to pass in the layout, pass in the value list name, the record, the field name, and what I want to show if there is no value selected or my placeholder. So let's go take a look. In return, I get a value list, which is an array. So I say for each value in the array, if the value in the array is what's in the field you were talking about, so it's basically the selected option again, then we're going to print it out as an option and mark it as selected. Say that one of our values were selected. So this is just like what I showed you, but a little bit more abstracted so that I can use it for anything I want to pass in. And if it's not selected, just show it as an option in the list. And if nothing was selected, then show our little placeholder, right? So very similar to what I showed you a while ago with the categories. So very similar. You're gonna get a value list back and use for each to loop through the array and decide what you want to do with it. Now containers, they had me really stumped. Actually, up until like 2 or 3 days ago, until I found this helpful link. Similar to the custom web publishing guide, FileMaker every once in a while will throw you a bone. So here we go. Down here, so this is about publishing the contents of container fields on the web. So I was lucky enough to find this. And boy, oh boy, was this confusing to me. So we authenticate with FileMaker. And then down here, we want to create a bit of HTML. It says, I want an image. The source is going to be image.php. I'm going to pass in a URL, and I'm going to use URL encode on the container field, right? So this looks like a bunch of gibberish. Very confusing, not very helpful. So yeah, once again, the description on how to implement containers here is seriously lacking explanation. But what we're going to do is use the PHP function URL encode on the container field, and then pass the result of that as parameter to a separate PHP file. So that was not at all apparent to me that this image.php, you have to create this and kind of fill it with the other steps they're showing here, including this one, if you want to get a container back. So super, super confusing the way they did that. But I hope that I can make that a little bit more clear. So let's see down here where I have my attachment. So I'm going to get the related photos for this attachment. Or for this contact rather, and then if I got something out of that, then I'm going to print my label, personal photo, and I'm going to say for each of the attachments, print out an image tag in HTML, and I'm going to say the image source is image.php. The URL is the URL encode that they showed, and we're going to use that on our container. So now we have to take a look at image.php. So we passed in the URL of our container, so now we need to authenticate with FileMaker, and we're going to return from FileMaker. We're going to use getContainerData to actually return the container object, and so it can display. And this is what that's going to look like in the end. So let's go in a menu, going to go to contacts, and it's going to take a second because it's pulling all the contacts in the system. Or a minute. We know a lot of people. Okay, so then we're going to click on Crystal Smith, and boom, there's our personal photo, right? Beautiful. Big Bieber fan. So now that pretty much sums up containers, and I expect we'll have some questions on that because that's a tough one. So the last, but definitely not least, is portals. So on a contacts form, we finally get to see how a portal works. Just like on our list layouts, we're going to use a table to structure our portal. So next, we're going to use getRelatedSet and pass the name of the related table. This is going to return an array of the related records. And the portal of related records must be present on the reference FileMaker layout for this to work. So just like everything else in the custom web publishing API, it has to be on the FileMaker layout you're referencing, or this will not work. We loop through the related records and echo the inputs we need. There's something unique about these inputs, though. We need to put the records ID in the name of each input. This is going to help us in identifying which field the input's data should be set into. Another trick used here is to have an extra set of inputs beneath our loop. This way, the user can enter separate data that can be used to create a new portal record. So once again, that is a lot, I understand, but it is very cool once you get it all working. So let's take a look at my phone numbers array here. So I've got my label for phone numbers. So this is what this looks like here, right? So here's my label. And I'm going to open up my table, right? And I'm going to say I want it to look like a portal, so I've got a specific CSS class for that. And I'm going to open up my body. I don't need a table header here because I don't want any labels. We just do kind of a placeholder text to show what field you're in. So I'm going to get my contact record that we got up above and use getRelatedSet to get the related phone numbers, and those get fetched back as an array. So here I'm using ifIsArray because if that was blank, it would not actually be an array. And I'm trying to use array-specific functions down here. So if what I passed was blank, then these array-specific functions are going to break. So right here in my PHP page, it would just stop. So I have to check, did I get something first before I start printing out the data? So then for each phone number record, I'm gonna fetch the record ID, echo a new table row, and then I start my table data, which is a pop-up menu. And this is where it gets really confusing to do portals. This is difficult. We actually want to use the phone number's record ID in the name of our pop-up menu because the reason being is it this record's pop-up menu or this record's pop-up menu or one of these records pop-up menu. So you've got to kind of include the primary key or something unique to say it's this record's type field that we're updating. So then I use my build value list one field function again to get the phone types, and then I move on and I do the same thing for the phone number field where I append the record ID of the phone number so that we can make sure that we're updating the right phone number for the right record. And then below, I create another table row. So this is outside of my loop now. And I create an additional table row that I name specifically to say this select, this type here, is a new phone number type. And I use getValueList2 fields to get my phone number types again. I print out those options. And I do the same thing for the phone number down here. I put the word new there, so just that when I go to put these values away, I know that this is going to be a brand new phone number and I'm not updating old data. So this is how I get the kind of nice effect that FileMaker has in their portals, where you can continuously add new records at the bottom of portals. Now, for mine, I can only update this one at a time. I can enter a new phone number, and then I've got to click submit if I want to refresh the page. So for example, I can go business, and I can't add another one here. Unfortunately, I've got to submit, and then it's going to reload the page and get the container and everything. It takes a second. So, but you see, it is still nice. It has the effect of FileMaker, albeit not quite as nice. So now we're going to submit our contacts form, and we're going to use getRelatedSet to get that array of related phone numbers again. Then for each phone number, we'll set the records ID into a variable. We'll then set each phone number field using the data entered into the form. We actually use the records ID in fetching the name of the variable that was posted from the form. This way, we get the data from the form that is specific to that record in the portal. So let's take a look at contact details submit. So here I'm submitting the contact details form, obviously. So we're going to skip down to where I put away my array. So I'm going to get my related phone numbers again. They're going to be stored in an array. I'm going to check if there's anything in the array, and then I'm going to loop through the records. So for each phone number record, get the record ID, and then start setting the fields, right? So I'm going to set the phone number records type to the phone number records ID appended to the type. So I fetch back the correct posted variable for this particular phone number record. I'm looping through and setting each one. And then I do the same thing for the phone number. So I say update the phone number record with this phone number record ID, right? Then I commit all my changes, and if there was an error, then we're going to do the same thing. We're going to print out the error, and we're going to exit my PHP right here so I can see what was set to what. And then beneath my loop, where I'm updating each type and each phone number record, I'm going to say if they entered something in the new type field or the new phone number field, we're going to create a new related record in contact phone numbers, and we're going to set the values of that new record to what was put in the new posted variables. I'm going to commit that, and if there was any errors, then we're going to exit. So I'm putting these away separately from the loop that I'm putting these away in my submit script here. So there are still a couple of things I've not really mastered about this. Fully justified tab buttons are super difficult to do in CSS. I'll show you what I've got so far for tabs, but I'm not very proud of them yet. They don't quite look as nice as they do on WebDirect. So objectives are going to take a second to think about it. It's got a lot of stuff to load as well. And there we go. So this is kind of my first stab at tabs. They kind of look like tab buttons, and they're left justified, which FileMaker has that as well. But the way we do ours is I'll go to objectives here so you can see the parallel. Let's see. So this is the layout I'm actually trying to recreate in PHP. So yeah, we do our tabs fully justified, and I just cannot seem to get these are actually just buttons. Can't seem to get these all the way across. So, but they do work. They do stuff. So also getting really wide tables to look good on a narrow screen. This is a bummer. I really want this to look good, but I don't know how. So I've got my objectives list here, and I'm gonna, let's see, I'm not gonna maximize Chrome, and I'm gonna shrink this up, right? So my buttons do as they're told, right? They kind of stack up automatically and look very nice, but tables don't really like being shrunk up because they've got, and it really makes sense if you think about it, because they've got these headers that have to go along with all the data that's beneath them. So if you shrink up the table, what is it supposed to do? What are the labels that's going to start floating off on the right while the table's data kind of like collapses like my buttons do above? So I haven't gotten that right yet. So for right now, I'm just cutting off the right side of the table. And if you're on an iPhone or something, you can still read the subject of the objective. You can still click it and drill down and see the details. But it's not quite as slick as I would like it to be. And last but not least, submitting the form by clicking on the background. So that is obviously a very FileMaker sort of thing to do. I can make this happen by adding onClick equals submit, which is basically when I click my form, run the submit script in JavaScript. But then even if I click like an input or a field and I try to enter data, it'll just start submitting the form for me. So I can't like click anywhere on the form without it refreshing and submitting the form. So that's a bummer. But besides that, anybody have any questions? All right. Let's hope that this whole time my phone here has been getting good audio out of this. Yes, I hope everybody's been able to hear me. So, could someone come in there just for a second? So it looks like Dave's not there. Chris and Jason are here. And, oh, Dave is indeed there. Thank you for being there, Dave. Good, the audio was good. Good to hear that, because that was really long. Hope I didn't talk for 45 minutes just to myself. But yeah, hey, you guys are really smart, because you got dragged through 45 minutes of PHP and you understood every little bit of it. Congratulations. Go create your own websites and kick WebDirect to the curb and all that. No, I'm just kidding. WebDirect's great. I hope FileMaker doesn't smite me for that. But so yeah, well, waiting for somebody to come online here. But in the meantime, been a really fun experience. I've really enjoyed taking the time off of FileMaker to learn PHP. Thank you, Dave. Thanks for coming and listening to me babble on about this stuff for a while. Yeah, you guys are letting me get off easy. I must have done a perfect explanation. That's why this is happening. Nothing more to cover. Well, nice to meet you, Dave. Don't think we've had the pleasure before. Where are you located? Oh, okay. You're not too far from us. Well, it looks like it only took 45 minutes to explain like a month's worth of work. Yes, yes. One day, computers will be so smart that I will just say these things and they will be done. All right, well, it seems like everybody's feeling pretty shy tonight, so should I stop the recording and wrap up, or? All right, sounds good. Well, all right, everybody. Well, I'll be seeing you guys next month.
It just came on audio.
Testing. Hey, good night, Dave. Thanks a lot, Eddie. Thanks for coming. Oh, yeah, you too. All right, well, I'm probably going to end the recording, and thanks, guys. We'll see you next month.